The mechanism of this social filtering is not just a modern inconvenience, it is a deep-seated biological instinct that happens in less than a second. Machiavelli observed 500 years ago that the vulgar crowd is always taken in by appearances, and this remains the fundamental law of the human eye. If you look weak, the world instinctively identifies you as prey. But if you look poor, you are simply treated as invisible. This is the brutal geometry of perception, a world where before you even offer value or shake a hand, your worth has already been decided. In the high-stakes theater of American life, appearing poor acts as a silent alarm bell to those around you. It signals to the gatekeepers of power that you lack the resources to reciprocate favors, the discipline to manage your own life, or the status to be worth their time. We live in a society that prides itself on meritocracy, yet the first hurdle to any opportunity is never your merit, it is your aesthetic. When you walk into a job interview, a luxury dealership, or even a high-end restaurant, the staff and onlookers are scanning for symbols of competence. If they find none, the doors of psychology slam shut before you reach the desk. You could be a genius with a plan to change the world, but if your presentation screams struggle, people will focus so much on the struggle that they never see the genius. This is why looking poor makes everything work against you. It places you in a psychological deficit where you must work 10 times harder just to be heard, while a well-dressed charlatan is granted the benefit of the doubt without saying a single word. The danger of looking poor lies in how it triggers the just world fallacy in others, a cognitive bias where people assume that if someone is struggling, they must have done something to deserve it. When people see the signs of poverty, they don't see a victim of circumstance. They see a red flag of potential instability. They assume laziness, lack of intelligence, or a lack of self-respect. In the predatory world of business and social climbing, looking poor is like bleeding in shark-infested waters. It signals to manipulators that you are desperate and therefore easily exploited. And it signals to potential partners that you are a liability to be avoided. You become a shadow in a world of neon lights. To break this cycle, you must realize that projecting an image of success is not about vanity, it is about psychological warfare. It is about denying the world the pleasure of underestimating you. It is about forcing the gatekeepers to treat you as an equal before they ever find out what is in your bank account. The human brain is wired to conserve energy, and judging people by their appearance is the ultimate shortcut. We categorize others into assets or liabilities instantly. When you look like you possess status, people subconsciously want to be near you in the hopes that some of that status will rub off on them. They offer you better service, better information, and better deals because they see an investment. But when you look poor, you are viewed as a withdrawal. People fear that you will ask for something, a loan, a favor, or a handout. This fear creates a barrier of coldness that you can feel in every interaction. It's why the homeless person is walked around without a glance, and why the man in the worn-out suit is ignored by the clerk. By failing to command respect through your appearance, you are effectively opting out of the social contract of the elite. You are choosing to play the game on hard mode, while the rest of the world is looking for any excuse to count you out.
The tragedy of the modern man is believing that his inner value will eventually outshine his outer neglect, but the world is far too hurried and far too cynical for such romanticism. Machiavelli understood that while everyone sees what you seem to be, few touch what you are. When you look poor, you are essentially telling the world that you have given up on the most visible part of your existence, which leads them to assume you have given up on the invisible parts as well, your ambition, your discipline, and your spirit. This is the silent tragedy of the man who refuses to play the game of perception. He becomes a prisoner of his own lack of optics. In the urban jungles of America, status is not just a badge of honor, it is a shield. Without it, you are exposed to the elements of social indifference and predatory judgment. Everything works against the man who looks poor, because the world is a mirror that reflects back the level of respect you demand from it. If you demand nothing by looking like nothing, the world will gladly oblige. This brutal geometry of perception creates a social friction that drains your energy every single day. When you look like you belong at the bottom, you face constant microaggressions and roadblocks that the high-status individual never encounters. You wait longer for service, you are questioned more thoroughly by authority figures, and you are ignored by those who could actually help you climb the ladder. This constant friction wears down the soul, making you feel as though the universe itself is conspiring against you. But it is not the universe, it is the collective biological instinct of your peers. They are responding to the data points you are providing. If your data points suggest struggle, scarcity, and weakness, the human hive mind reacts by distancing itself from you to protect its own perceived status. To be seen as poor is to be seen as a loser in the game of life, and humans, being social animals, have a terrifyingly strong aversion to losers. Consider the psychology of the prey drive. In nature, a predator does not attack a healthy, strong, and alert animal. It looks for the one that is limping, the one that is isolated, the one that looks less than. In human society, this prey drive is manifested through bullying, exploitation, and economic exclusion. When you look poor, you are broadcasting your vulnerability. You are inviting the manipulators and the con artists who believe you are desperate enough to be tricked. Simultaneously, you are repelling the honest and the successful who do not want to be weighed down by someone else's misfortunes. This dual effect leaves you in a social vacuum where only the predators dare to enter. Machiavelli's wisdom was to project an aura of strength so impenetrable that the predators would look for an easier target elsewhere. By looking successful, you create a psychological barrier that commands a baseline of respect even before you have proven your worth. Furthermore, looking poor affects your internal psychology as much as it affects the world's view of you. There is a concept called enclothed cognition, which suggests that the clothes we wear actually change the way we think and act. When you are dressed in rags or ill-fitting, neglected clothing, you subconsciously begin to act like someone who doesn't matter. Your gait becomes slower, your voice becomes quieter, and your eyes avoid the gaze of others. You begin to fulfill the world's low expectations of you. You become the ghost that society wants you to be. But the moment you dress as if you have power, as if you have a seat at the table, your biology responds. Your testosterone levels rise, your posture straightens, and you begin to speak with the authority of someone who deserves to be heard. You cannot afford the luxury of looking poor because it is a self-fulfilling prophecy that anchors you to the very bottom of the social hierarchy.
The world is a marketplace of images, and in this market, looking poor is the equivalent of being a bankrupt brand. No one invests in a brand that looks like it's failing. They invest in growth, in stability, and in prestige. If you want the world to work for you, you must provide it with a reason to believe that you are a winning bet. You must master the art of the mask, ensuring that the first second of human judgment works in your favor rather than against it. Stop allowing your appearance to be a weapon used by your enemies. Start using it as a bridge to your own power. Remember, the cruelty of the human eye is inevitable, but your invisibility is optional. The brutal geometry of perception dictates that the world does not owe you a discovery of your soul. It only responds to the signals you broadcast. When you look poor, you are broadcasting a signal of low utility. In the cold logic of social survival, people are constantly calculating the return on investment for every interaction they have. They ask themselves, what does this person bring to my life? If your appearance suggests that you are struggling for the basics, the answer in their mind is zero. Or worse, they see you as a negative utility, someone who will eventually need a favor, a loan, or emotional labor that they are not willing to provide. This is why the man who looks poor finds the world's heart made of stone. It isn't that people are inherently evil, It is that they are biologically designed to avoid the sinking ship. They see your struggle not as a temporary state, but as a defining characteristic of your identity. To them, your worn-out shoes and unkempt hair are not signs of a busy life, they are signs of a chaotic mind. This brings us to the concept of social momentum. Success breeds success because it projects an image that attracts more resources. When you look like you have already won, people want to help you win even more, hoping to be part of your trajectory. But when you look poor, you have negative momentum. People want to distance themselves from your descent. This is why everything works against the man who looks poor. Even his genuine attempts at hard work are viewed through the lens of suspicion. If a wealthy-looking man works late, he is seen as ambitious and dedicated. If a poor-looking man works late, he is seen as desperate and struggling. The same action is interpreted in two completely different ways based solely on the aesthetic of the person performing it. You are trapped in a narrative that you didn't write, but you are providing the illustrations for it every time you neglect your image. Furthermore, we must examine the gatekeeper effect. Every significant advancement in your life, a promotion, a contract, a social circle, is guarded by a gatekeeper. These gatekeepers are often overwhelmed and use visual profiling as a primary tool for sorting people. They look for cultural alignment. If you look poor, you look like you don't belong in the rooms where the decisions are made. You look like an outsider trying to sneak in. This triggers a defensive response from the gatekeeper, who feels it is their duty to protect the prestige of their domain from those who don't reflect its values. You are rejected not because your ideas were bad, but because your presence lowered the perceived value of the room. Machiavelli understood that to enter the palace, you must first look like you belong in the palace. Once you are inside, your brilliance can take over. But if you fail the visual test at the door, your brilliance will die in the hallway. This is the psychological tax of poverty. It is a tax that is paid in missed opportunities, ignored emails, and cold shoulders. It is a tax that the world collects from you every hour of every day. To stop paying this tax, you must adopt the aesthetics of competence. This does not mean buying things you cannot afford. It means cultivating an image of order, cleanliness, and self-respect. It means understanding that in the eyes of the observer, your self-care is a proxy for how you will care for their business, their money, or their reputation. If you cannot maintain the small details of your own appearance, why would they trust you with the large details of their interests? The world is not a fair judge, but it is a consistent one. It rewards the mask of power and punishes the look of the victim. If you want to change your life, you must first change the way the world sees you, for in the brutal geometry of perception, the cover is the only thing most people will ever read.
The final layer of the perception trap is the psychological isolation that comes from being treated as invisible. When you look poor, you are forced to live in a world where you are constantly screaming for recognition, but the echoes only return to you in the form of cold indifference. This isolation breeds a unique kind of resentment that can rot a man's ambition from the inside out. You begin to hate the vulgar crowd for their superficiality, but in doing so, you forget that you are bound by the same biological laws. You are a part of the very system that is excluding you. Machiavelli's most cold-blooded realization was that the morality of the individual is irrelevant in the face of the mechanics of the state and the society. The world does not care if you are a good person beneath your tattered clothes. It only cares if you are an effective person, and effectiveness is always draped in the garments of success. By refusing to adapt your image, you are not taking a moral stand, you are committing social suicide. We must also recognize the predatory comfort that society feels when they see a man who looks poor. When you appear defeated and low status, you are no longer a threat to anyone's position in the hierarchy. People may offer you a fleeting moment of pity, but pity is the most condescending of all human emotions. Pity is what we feel for the wounded animal that we know will never hunt again. If you enjoy the pity of others, you have already accepted your place at the bottom of the food chain. To climb, you must replace their pity with their respect, and respect is born from fear and admiration. You must look like a contender. You must look like someone who is capable of taking what they want from life. When you look poor, you are signaling that you have already been conquered. You are a walking monument to your own failures, and the world will treat you like a ruin, something to be looked at with a brief sadness before moving on to something more vibrant and alive. The brutal geometry of perception is ultimately a filter for excellence. Society uses these harsh visual cues to separate those who are willing to master themselves from those who are merely existing. Self-mastery begins with the surface. If you cannot master the image that the world sees, the world assumes you cannot master the complex emotions, the difficult decisions, and the high-level strategies required for power. This is the ultimate Machiavellian filter. It is the first test you must pass to enter the game of influence. Looking poor is a choice to fail the first test. It is a choice to remain in the shadows, to be the prey, and to be the ghost. Everything works against the man who looks poor because he has signaled to the universe that he is not worth its favor. As we reach the end of this journey through the dark corridors of perception, understand that the rules of this game are non-negotiable. You can complain about the unfairness of the human eye, or you can use its predictable nature to your advantage. You can choose to be the man who is ignored, or you can choose to be the man who commands the room before he even speaks. The mask of power is waiting for you to pick it up. In a world of predators, the only thing more dangerous than being poor is looking poor. Take control of the signals you send, for in the silence of the first second, your fate is already being sealed. Stop being the victim of the geometry. Become the architect of your own perception.